happens when a genuine scientific breakthrough and a market meltdown land in the same 5-day stretch. Does the breakthrough even get to matter? That's the tension running through this whole week in quantum, and today we're going to sort it out. Here's the week that was. Quantinuum published a real first in Nature, a universal gate set built from braiding anyons, exactly the kind of hardware progress this field brags about. And on the very same trading days, IBM had its worst single day on record. Quantum stocks gave back a third of their recent gains, and two more companies, D-Wave and Germany's Aqarios, went public anyway. Underneath all of that, the research kept moving. Qubit resets got 25 times faster, the European Space Agency plugged in its first quantum computer, and the funding and hiring machine never stopped humming. Welcome back to Quickly Quantum, your daily brief on the quantum frontier. It's Saturday, July 18th, 2026. Let's get into the week. Now, we've been tracking Quantinuum's Anyon work for a couple of weeks, so here's the quick version. Anyons are exotic particle-like excitations that only exist in certain two-dimensional quantum systems. And when you braid them around each other, literally move them in loops, that braiding pattern itself can encode and process information, which is the whole appeal of topological quantum computing. The information is protected by geometry, not just brute force error correction. This week's delta, confirmed in a peer-reviewed Nature paper, is that Quantinuum, working with Harvard, the University of Chicago, Caltech, and Stony Brook, demonstrated the first universal gate set, enough operations to run any quantum program, built entirely from braiding and fusing non-abelian anyons on its 54-qubit H2 trapped ion processor. That matters because it could cut reliance on magic state distillation, a resource-hungry error correction technique. On X, at Aqarios flagged the related industrial news that Quantinuum, Rolls-Royce, Riverlane, and the University of Edinburgh signed a pact to explore quantum computing for industrial design and simulation, and at SPAC Liquidity shared the same announcement. My read hasn't changed. It's a real first, but Quantinuum has incrementally re-announced Anyon milestones since 2023, so scaling this past 54 qubits is still the open question. Now, the story that dominated headlines for reasons that had nothing to do with physics. IBM stock fell 25% in a single session, its worst day on record. Worse than Black Monday back in 1987. The cause, per a preliminary Q2 warning, was clients hoarding AI hardware, servers, storage, memory, at the expense of software and infrastructure spending, which is IBM's traditional bread and butter. CEO Arvind Krishna admitted the company, quote, faltered, but he reaffirmed IBM's $10 billion 5-year quantum computing investment. On X, trader at Archer P78 framed it as a real open question for the whole AI trade, summarizing it as either a classic side effect of the AI spending boom or a buying opportunity ahead of the Q2 earnings call on July 22nd. That call is the thing to actually watch. Full results land Tuesday, and some coverage has flagged a securities fraud investigation tied to the preliminary disclosure. My take. Reaffirming a quantum roadmap in a press release is easy. Whether it survives an actual budget conversation after a day like that one is the real test. Now, IBM wasn't alone. The broader quantum sector had already given back about a third of its post-executive order rally, and IonQ, for instance, slid from north of $60 a share down to around $39. Analysts pointed to broader macro risk-off selling, tied partly to tensions in the Strait of Hormuz, rather than anything company-specific. On X, at Layer K Cap put it bluntly, another -5 to -6% day on quantum, except for IBM. If that rolls over, these stocks are headed for the penny stock zone. And at Quantum Leap 1234, broke the carnage down ticker by ticker. INFQ down 8.21%, leading the drop. Rigetti down 7.54. D-Wave down 7.39. QNT down 6.59. IonQ down 6.42. XNDU down 6.26, and Quantum Computing Inc. down 4.98, with HQ holding up best at down 4.47. Every modality, trapped ion, superconducting, annealing, photonic, sold off together, which the analyst called single-factor risk. Worth noting, IonQ's own Q1 revenue was up 755% year over year, with a growing backlog. This looks like sentiment and macro fear, not a fundamentals problem. Now, a smaller but symbolically neat item to round out the market news. D-Wave completed its previously announced move, and its stock now officially trades on the Nasdaq. We flagged this transfer earlier in the week, so the news itself isn't new, but the timing is worth a beat. D-Wave finalized this listing in the same stretch that saw the broader quantum sector lose a third of its rally and IBM post its worst trading day ever. That contrast matters. As pure-play quantum companies chase visibility and liquidity on major exchanges, which listing you're on becomes its own signal to institutional investors who screen by index membership. And Nasdaq carries more of that institutional weight than some of the smaller boards these companies started on. D-Wave joins a growing list of quantum names making that same move this year. Nothing dramatic on its own, but it's one more brick in the sector's slow shift from scrappy startup story to ordinary tradable stock, right as the market reminds everyone how volatile that stock can be. Now, sticking with the public markets theme, Munich-based Aqarios completed a reverse merger SPAC listing on the Dusseldorf Stock Exchange this week, becoming Germany's first publicly listed quantum computing pure play. Aqarios builds quantum optimization software rather than hardware, so this is a smaller company than the trapped ion and superconducting giants we usually talk about, but it fits a pattern we've been seeing all month. Quantum firms on both sides of the Atlantic using the SPAC playbook to get public fast rather than waiting out a traditional IPO process. The catch is the same one that applies everywhere else this week. A SPAC listing for a company at this stage locks in a valuation before the business has necessarily proven durable, recurring revenue, and pre-revenue scale quantum companies going public carry the same speculative risk we flagged with the bigger names. Still, symbolically, this is a real milestone for Germany's quantum ecosystem, and it's one more data point that Europe's quantum companies aren't content to just watch American and Canadian peers have all the public market fun. Now here's one that deserves fuller treatment because it got buried under IBM's stock story this week, and it's a nice, quiet counter-narrative. While Wall Street was busy torching IBM's share price, IBM's quantum team was still shipping. The company announced a 25 times improvement in qubit reset speed on its latest processor. Quick gloss for anyone who needs it: resetting a qubit means putting it back to a known starting state. Think of re-zeroing a scale, before you can run the next calculation. And every microsecond that reset takes is dead time your quantum computer isn't computing, plus it's overhead that eats into how many operations you can run before noise wins. Cutting that time by 25x doesn't single-handedly fix IBM's error correction roadmap, but it's the kind of unglamorous plumbing work that compounds. Faster resets mean more circuits per second, which means faster experiments and, eventually, faster error correction cycles. Alongside that, IBM released Qiskit version 2.5, the latest update to the open-source quantum software framework that thousands of researchers and companies use to actually program IBM's hardware. Now, I want to be careful not to oversell this. A faster reset is one piece of the fault tolerance puzzle, and it doesn't by itself change IBM's competitive position against Google or Quantinuum, whose anyone result we just talked about. But it's worth sitting with the contrast for a second. The same week IBM had its worst trading day in company history, the actual engineering kept moving forward at its normal pace. That's the split worth getting comfortable holding at once. A company's stock price and a company's research output can tell two completely different stories in the same 72 hours. And neither one is lying. They're just measuring different things. Now, here's a story that flew under the radar this week and deserves the spotlight. The European Space Agency installed its first on-premises quantum computer. It's going into ESA's Earth Observation Center in Frascati, Italy, and the machine itself is a Bell 1 system built by Equal One, an Irish quantum computing spinout, and, crucially, it's being integrated directly with ESA's existing high-performance computing infrastructure rather than sitting off in a lab as a standalone science project. Why should a non-technical listener care? Earth observation is exactly what it sounds like. Satellites and sensors gathering huge volumes of data about climate, agriculture, disasters, ocean health, and processing that data at scale is a genuinely hard computational problem, the kind where even small efficiency gains matter because of the sheer volume involved. The bet ESA is making is that certain pieces of that pipeline, optimization problems in particular, might eventually run faster or more efficiently with quantum hardware sitting alongside classical supercomputers, rather than replacing them outright. And choosing to install the hardware on site instead of renting time on a cloud quantum service the way most organizations do today says something about how seriously ESL is treating this as long-term infrastructure rather than a one-off experiment. This is a concrete example of quantum computing moving out of pilot program purgatory and into operational government science infrastructure, which is a bigger deal than a single installation might suggest. Space agencies don't wire permanent hardware into their systems lightly. That said, let's keep the excitement calibrated. This is early-stage integration, and any claims about accelerated Earth observation workloads haven't been independently benchmarked yet. What we have right now is a real, physical quantum computer sitting inside a real government research facility doing real integration work with real supercomputing systems. The actual performance case still has to be made. Worth watching whether ESA publishes benchmark results, because that's the point where this graduates from an interesting installation to a proven tool. Now for the people side of the industry, because a quiet trend this week was executive musical chairs across 3 quantum companies. Pascal, the French neutral atom quantum computing company, appointed Mark Armstrong, previously at HPE, as Chief Commercial Officer for the EMEA and Asia-Pacific regions. PsiQuantum and HiQ also brought on senior executives this week, rounding out what's genuinely a busy stretch of leadership hires across the sector. Now, why does a hiring roundup deserve airtime on a news show? Because who a quantum company hires tells you what stage it thinks it's in. Bringing in a chief commercial officer from a company like HPE, which sells enterprise hardware and infrastructure at massive scale, signals that Pascal isn't just trying to publish papers anymore. It's building out the sales muscle to actually close enterprise deals across 2 huge geographic regions. And Pascal isn't alone. PsiQuantum and HiQ making similar moves in the same week suggests this is an industry-wide shift, not one company's strategy. We're watching quantum computing collectively try to graduate from research lab culture to go-to-market culture, recruiting people whose entire careers have been built around enterprise sales cycles rather than physics papers. It's also worth noting this comes in the same stretch where public quantum stocks were getting hammered, which tells you enterprise-facing hiring decisions and daily stock charts really do run on separate clocks. That's a genuinely different skill set from the physics side, and it's the kind of hire that doesn't make headlines the way a new qubit record does, but it's arguably just as important if these companies actually want revenue instead of just research grants. Keep an eye on whether these commercial hires start showing up in actual signed contracts over the next couple of quarters. That's the real test of whether this hiring wave produces results or just resumes. And finally this week, the venture money kept flowing even while public markets wobbled, a reminder that early-stage investors and day traders are operating on completely different time horizons. Singapore's Peace Stacol raised $3.9 million in seed funding, co-led by SG Innovate and Lotus One, to expand its quantum-safe cybersecurity business into the US, Europe, and the Middle East. Quick gloss. Quantum-safe, or post-quantum, cybersecurity means encryption designed to survive an attack from a future quantum computer powerful enough to break today's standard encryption. The fear being that data encrypted today could be harvested now and cracked later once that hardware exists. Separately, UK-based Arc Quantum Technologies closed a $1.4 million pre-seed round led by Ground State Ventures to build quantum repeater technology, hardware designed to relay and preserve quantum signals over long distances, which is the missing piece for anything resembling a real quantum internet. Now, let's be honest about the size of these numbers. Seed and pre-seed rounds in the low single-digit millions are not proof of a durable market yet. They're early-stage bets on a real problem, securing data and infrastructure against a quantum threat that most experts still put years out. But taken together with the broader crypto defense narrative we've been tracking, that steady drip of smaller post-quantum security raises tells you where a meaningful slice of venture appetite is quietly pointing, even in a week when the big public quantum names were bleeding red on the ticker. Together, these are exactly the kind of unglamorous, infrastructure-first bets you'd expect early-stage deep tech investors to make. Not flashy, but foundational if either post-quantum cryptography or a real quantum internet ends up mattering as much as the roadmaps suggest. So that's the week. A genuine scientific first in topological quantum computing, a historic stock plunge, a sector-wide pullback, 2 new public listings, and enough hardware and funding news underneath to remind you the actual engineering never stopped. These are threads we'll keep pulling on this week, especially with IBM's full Q2 earnings landing Tuesday. If the show's earning your time, hit follow wherever you're listening. And if you've got a colleague who keeps asking you what's going on with quantum stocks, send them this one. That's Quickly Quantum for today. New episodes every day. This is an AI-voiced podcast created and built by a real person using today's cutting-edge technology. And remember, nothing on this show is financial advice. I'm Brian Lampert. See you tomorrow.